set to pit a union of pro-Western opposition forces against a ruling party accused of democratic backsliding and shifting towards Russia. Voters in Georgia go to the polls this Saturday as Brussels warns that the elections will be crucial for the country's long-held aspirations to join the EU. Well, to discuss, we're joined now by geopolitics and security expert Tintin Japaridze. Thank you so much for joining us from the Eurasia Group. Firstly, these elections, they're being billed as a crucial test for Georgia. Russia looms large, of course. Tell us, what's at stake?
Thank you very much, Sharon. Good to be with you. Well, above all, Sharon, the future of Georgia is at stake on October 26th and its aftermath. I honestly do not recall a Georgian election that was not described as pivotal and critical for the country's continued progress and development. But now, more than ever, we see that the choice is very clear. Will Georgia become a Russian satellite? Or can the pro-European movement that is the only answer for Georgia's future prevail?
And what are the polls suggesting at this point? What way is it going to go, do you think?
Well, the polls are really very much all over the place, Sharon, because on the one hand, we see polls that are in many ways pushed forward and perhaps even sponsored by the government. And they tell us that the government is going to enjoy another landslide win. But then on the other hand, the more independent pollsters are telling us something entirely different. We're actually seeing that it's going to be a bit of a toss-up because it's very difficult right now to tell whether the Georgian dream will be able to actually, if we're being completely honest, steal the election, because without rigging the election results, they would not be able to win this election in a free and transparent environment. And on the other hand, it'll be very interesting to see whether the opposition coalitions will be able to truly come together and convince the population that they are the answer in helping Georgians to come to what they think is the only solution, and that is the next stop, and that is Europe.
And what have some of the main concerns been for those voters? There have been concerns about Russian disinformation and interference, for example. Also, conspiracy theories have featured in the campaign as well.
Yes, very much so. We have seen a lot of Russian disinformation, a lot of Russian influence, not just in the pre-election period, but in the years prior, if we're being completely transparent. I mean, even at times when we see the Georgian Dreams narratives, it is absolutely absurd how they tend to copy what Moscow has been saying, but instead of saying it in Russian, they say the same thing in Georgian. So what we're going to see in the coming days is this deepened polarization, which has become inevitable. It has permeated every area of one's sort of existence in Georgia. Civil society, journalists who are unable to do their jobs, people who are genuinely concerned about going to the polls and casting their vote for the non-state actor, for the opposition. They are genuinely concerned, especially those people who are in the rural areas. They're concerned that they're going to lose their jobs, and worse yet, that they're going to endanger the safety of their family members. That is a real concern that very much reminds me of Russia around 2011, 2012, when Russia's fate was also being decided, and we know very well how that has ended. And many Georgians are concerned that we're going to see something very similar, Georgia becoming another Belarus, for example. That is a very, very serious risk. And one more thing that I will add is in terms of what is part of the messaging. Now, on the one hand, we see this pro-European, pro-EU message that has, of course, had a lot of success with those in the major cities, including in the capital, Tbilisi. But then on the other hand, there are other areas such as economic needs, economic grievances, the bread and butter issues that I think neither of the sides are necessarily responding to the way they should be, because at the moment, the opposition's messaging is very much aimed at the major cities throughout Georgia. And on the other hand, we see the Georgian Dream that is capitalizing on its continued support in the various regions of Georgia, in the rural parts of the country. So it remains to be seen which of the two will end up actually tipping to one side or the other. At the moment, I think it's a very, very, very close call. And it's not so much on the 26th of October, Sharon, that we're going to decide decide the fate of the country, but more so, I think, in the days after the election when we see what unfolds and how it unfolds.
Yes, because there are fears in some circles that the ruling party will try to stay in power regardless of the results.
Exactly. And that is a major concern. Mass demonstrations and possibly the risk of violence will be inevitable, I think, because what we saw in May of this year was just a teaser of what's to come. But most importantly, I hope that we can avoid mass escalation if the government pulls all the stops and cracks down on protesters with Moscow's support. What worries me is Tbilisi calling Moscow and actually asking them to do what they pledged they would do, and that is to stand by the Georgian dream. We cannot rule anything out because as far as the Georgian dream is concerned, they truly believe at their core that this is their final battle to stay in power no matter what, even if that means going against the will of their own people, the Georgian people that 12 years ago, many of them brought them into power.
A pivotal vote then, as you say, Tintin, this weekend. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to leave it there for now. That is Tintin Japaridze from the Eurasia Group. Well, the money raised